Hi, guys. Welcome to the Chelsea Skidmore Show. I'm here today with my guest comedian, Tom Green.
Great to be here, Chelsea. Thank you for having me on the show. I feel like we're doing a sports cast because we're sitting facing forward.
I know.
Like
I know nothing about sports, so can you lead us
I don't know
into
anything
the
about
next
sports
pitch?
either. I don't know anything about sports.
You don't?
Well, I know about hockey, but I don't like follow sports or talk about sports.
Hockey because you're from Canada?
From Canada.
Not to be hacky, but...
Yeah, played hockey my whole life, but I don't talk about sports.
I
Like
played
when
field hockey.
when people get together and they haven't seen each other in a while and they're like, "Hey, how about the Lakers? Oh yeah, LeBron's doing pretty good, yeah." And then they talk about sports for 10 minutes. I never do that.
Yeah, so you just sit that one out, or people know not to do it?
I just listen, and then sometimes I'll just leave or whatever. But I don't really talk about that because I don't know anything about it. And then I realized that maybe I need to know more about sports so that I can have more conversations with more types of people that like sports because it's a social thing. Maybe I'd be more social if I knew more about it.
But are those really your guy friends?
Just I'm saying, like when I'm traveling around the country doing stand-up and you go around and you're in different cities and everyone wants to talk about, oh, yeah, the Steelers are doing pretty good. Yeah, but, McCluskey, he's not playing so well this year. Oh, yeah, McCluskey, he's having a bad year, and then everyone knows what McCluskey's doing.
See, is that even a real guy?
No, because I don't even know a guy to use him as an example. That's how little I follow it.
Yeah.
Whatever, like the guy from, Brady,
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
Well, we all know him.
He's playing good.
Giselle.
Yeah. But I just meant, like, because we're sitting here at a desk like this beside it sort of feels like ESPN or something.
Yeah, I'm going to fold my hands for the rest of the interview.
That's all I'm saying. But great to be here. This is cool.
Yeah.
We're in the basement of the Comedy Store. I love it.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, I was excited to have you on. I was a big fan growing up of your show.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I've been posting clips of my show on my Instagram. I saw you liked one the other day.
Yeah, I did. It was so funny. I haven't looked up your clips in a while.
Yeah, I've been putting them on Instagram.
I haven't seen them since I was in middle school.
Yeah.
When I used to watch the show.
Was that like a few years ago?
Thank you. Oh, see what I didn't do back to you earlier.
What's that?
When you made a comment about your age.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just ignored it.
That's right, yeah.
Now I know what it felt like.
Because earlier I was talking about something and I said, oh, yeah, because I'm really old. And then you just said, yeah, sure. When I was really kind of fishing for you're not that old kind of thing. But it's all right. I get it. I am old. I'm 48 years old.
That's not that old.
Thank you.
You're not that old,
Thank
actually.
you very much. That's what I wanted earlier.
You know what I noticed? You've always had that beard.
Yeah, I have, yeah. It was a goatee for many years. But then the last 20 years, I've decided just a beard is the thing for me.
But you've always this area has been covered.
Pretty much, yeah. Not when I was a kid.
Obviously.
Yeah, but since I was around 17, yeah.
So you haven't shaved it since?
I've shaved it just to remember what I look like and then immediately grow it back because I'm reminded that I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm just not used to it. But... yeah, I don't know why. I don't have an answer for that. I just, in the
you like it.
Early 90s, I grew a goatee, and I never looked back. My dad always had a mustache, still does, has always had a mustache. I remember one day he shaved his mustache. It's probably around, 1982, and I didn't, recognize him. And then so it's just, I think it's a thing, people that have hair on their face just get used to it, and, you can't undo it.
Well, anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been watching these clips, doing a little research, prepping, checked out some on your website, and yeah, it immediately brought me back. So fucking funny. The one in particular that I was just watching, that the pizza one, when you come up as the backup.
Yeah.
What was it?
Undercutter's Pizza.
Undercutter's Pizza?
Undercutters. We undercut the competition by providing a perfectly good pizza at a lower price.
So you followed a pizza delivery guy.
You follow the pizza delivery guy to where he's delivering the pizza. You have a plain pizza and a fishing tackle box filled with all of the extra toppings. You get there, you walk up to the house with him. When the person comes out to buy their pizza, you look at the bill, you see, you ordered, pepperoni, green peppers, mushrooms. You quickly make the exact same pizza and then offer to sell it to the guy for cheaper, undercutting him, and then hopefully making the customer happy and making the pizza guy mad, and then the pizza guy gets mad at you, and then you film an angry pizza guy. But the one time I did this in my life, in year 1999 in Long Island, the pizza guy didn't even care, but then the guy I was trying to give a good deal to got angry and chased me with a hammer and tried to kill me. But it doesn't even make sense. I was offering him a deal. Doesn't even make sense, but that's the way it went down.
You only did it that one time?
One time, yeah. And that was one of the first bits we shot in the United States of America. Because the history of the show, I'm Canadian, and I did the show for years in Canada on public access TV, and nobody ever chased me with a hammer in Canada. And then when we moved, MTV picked up the show and moved my friends and I to New York, and we were doing the show, and one of the first times we went out to film with Americans, we realized, wow, like Americans are they chase you with hammers and stuff.
Has that happened another time too? People getting violently?
We just noticed that the Americans when an American is confronted by somebody trying to sell them a pizza for cheaper, they come at you with a hammer. Whereas in Canada, they're a little more nice about it.
Oh yeah. Well,
I think people are kind of get angrier quicker here.
Yeah.
They're more aggressive. Americans are more aggressive.
Yeah, everyone says that Canadians are just a lot nicer in general. So that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to frame it like Canadians are nicer because I know a lot of assholes in Canada, a lot of assholes. I know a lot of assholes in Canada, but there's also a lot of nice people. But I just think that maybe the way people are assholes in Canada is different. It's less violent. It's more passive aggressive.
Unless it's a hockey game.
Unless it's a hockey game. Yes, absolutely.
Why'd you only do it one time? And the other videos that you made, were those did you do those several times? Each one?
No, we always kind of tried to do different things every time. So it wasn't it was just one bit, we did it. No need to repeat it.
Well, you got a good reaction on that one.
Got a good reaction. I don't think there was any topping it. No,
pizza topping it.
Yeah, no, but no, we're not gonna get a guy chases with a hammer, again. So that was the reaction we wanted.
What about the other ones that you would do if you didn't get a good reaction? Would you refilm them at a different location?
Not really. The way it worked was we just were filming all the time, different ideas all the time, and the stuff that worked we would air, and the stuff that didn't work we wouldn't air.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there were some bits that were reoccurring bits. I did a lot of things to my parents.
Yeah.
Different versions of things. Woke up my parents in the middle of the night many times with different, scenarios, Highland dancers and bagpipers and music and
Cow's head,
yeah. Things like that.
Did you have to have a conversation with them and be like, look, I'm going to keep doing this? Or did you just keep surprising them? What was the off-camera conversation with them?
So, well, there was a lot of conversations with them over the years. We were talking about before we started, I was studying broadcasting, right? So we were talking about the color temperature of these lights. That's probably around 5,600 degrees Kelvin. Actually, it's got a little bit of actually, it doesn't seem like they're all actually the same.
No, they're not.
This one's a little bit warmer. So color temperature is the color of the light. So outdoor daylight is more of a blue color to it, you would say. 5,600 degrees Kelvin, I believe. Maybe it's 54, I forget. It's been a few years. Indoor light, a tungsten lamp, a light bulb, a traditional light bulb's more like 3,600. Yellower, a light can be yellow. So if you mix color temperatures, if you have a yellow light, if you had a light bulb here and a fluorescent light there, fluorescent light's higher, bluer, this one's yellower. Those mix together, your camera white balances, it gets confused, it doesn't know what the light is, and then you get this gross looking video. So you want to have all your light the same.
Damn.
So then when you white balance.
So do you think this is not how you would have lit the room?
It's pretty good. These lights actually probably you can adjust the color temperature. There's probably a little knob on the back, and if you just turn them all fully in one direction, they'd all be the same, and you're fine. But you're fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's great. Great studio. Love it.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, you said that you built one.
Yeah, I built a TV studio in my living room. I always like to do all this stuff myself, like the show I created with my friends from school, and then we sold it to MTV, and that's always been sort of how I've operated, So that's why I love doing stand-up, because you're independent of the mainstream, show business industry.
You don't have to wait around for anything.
Yeah,
you can just
your
get
own
up
thing.
and do it.
create your own thing and do it. So
we're going to jump around a lot. I hope you don't mind, because you keep saying things that make me want to talk about
so much stuff to talk about. Yeah. And sometimes I try to change the topic when we talk too much about my past when I do podcasts, because I tend to when you do, I'd rather talk about the lighting temperature
as opposed to the parents. And now I'm remembering what you changed the topic from.
Yeah, because I changed the topic because sometimes I'll end up telling a lot of the same stories, and I don't know them. I know. I'll tell you. I'll answer whatever you want.
But I don't know them.
I'll answer whatever you want. Answer whatever you want.
Thank
I
you.
just like when the viewers who've seen me on other podcasts don't get the same stories every time. It's for the benefit of your podcast.
Well,
too.
let me try to think of questions and then.
But we can talk about whatever,
Yeah. Well, then I am interested in knowing how your show started. You started with your friends in Canada.
Yeah.
Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn. Yeah, and my friend Phil, and they, when I was in college and wanting to make a television show and do comedy, I did stand-up before the show too. I started doing stand-up when I was 16 years old, 32 years ago. Thank you very much. 32 years ago. It's weird. I started doing stand-up at Yuck Yucks in Ottawa in I guess it would have been 1987 or 86 or something like that. And the owner there, Howard Wagman, still runs the club. And now when I go back to my hometown to visit my family, I do stand-up at the Yuck Yucks up there, and I feel like I've gone back in time.
Wow.
It's cool. But we can talk about stand-up in a minute. But yeah, so I started the show with my friends from broadcasting school, and I was 24 years old when I started the show. And I moved back into my parents' basement because I didn't have time for a job because I was too busy editing videos and making videos all day.
What kind of videos were you making back then?
Kind of like the ones we're talking about,
like prank videos,
going out on the street and doing things, interviewing people, pulling. Yeah, we didn't really call them pranks. We can get really into the weeds on the way I define what we did if you want, or I could just say, prank videos.
No, I want to get into it. And
so I don't consider it a prank if the camera's not hidden. When it's hidden camera, I consider it a prank. So you watch the show like Impractical Jokers, they're doing pranks because the cameras are hidden and people don't know what's going on and everyone's laughing. It's like candid camera. We rarely hid the camera. Like when we did Undercutter's Pizza, I walked up, there was a camera guy standing beside me. The camera guy, to us, was always kind of like an additional element of confusion, right? Like now the person's not only they're getting pranked, but then they're also getting filmed, which is like extra stressful.
Yeah.
Why are you filming me?
Because they didn't have shit. Was Buzzkill
That was a show before.
Okay.
I never saw that show because we didn't have MTV in Canada, but I heard about it. But regardless, people didn't have these.
Yeah, so no one was doing that.
There wasn't cameras around everywhere. You walked up and started filming somebody, and people get pretty stressed out. Sometimes you didn't even have to do anything. You just have to go up and start talking to somebody, and they'd get mad just because there was a camera in their face. And why are you filming me? What is this for? I don't want to be on television. But that's why when we started the show, we would purposely use the smallest cameras we could find, sometimes the shittiest cameras we could find, because we wanted people to not think that we were from TV. We wanted people to think that we were just a bunch of goofy kids, which we were. And that was what was new about the show. Usually, traditionally in television, people were always trying to film with the best cameras they could get if they had a television show, which at the time would have been a Betacam SP camera, which is about this big, with a big lens on it, and it looks like you're from the news, and everybody would take you seriously. We wanted people to not take us seriously, which I think was the new idea of what the Tom Green Show was. That was the thing that was new. We were trying to look like we were amateurs, even though we weren't really.
That's a really smart idea.
Yeah, and now you can be a professional, and the lines are blurred now because all cameras are smaller and people are used to seeing cameras, and so. But at the time, it was very out of the box. Even when we went to MTV, and then they brought in big crews and they started giving us all these cameras, I had to kind of say, no. We want to use this camera, the smallest camera. We don't want people walking around with headsets on, with clipboards, standing in the background, because that's going to look like we're from a television channel. We want this guy to totally disrespect me and pick up a hammer and come at me. He's not going to do that if there's 5 people standing behind the camera. He's going to realize we might be important or something. So that was kind of what we consciously did to try to change the way television was made.
Yeah, so then did you have once MTV did get involved, did you maintain that you would only have like a small skeleton crew?
Yeah, but it didn't happen right away because they picked our show up. When I say they picked us up, I had already had like 1,000 videos that I'd edited already. I remember the way the show got picked up. I was on a talk show in Canada called the Mike Bullard Show. He was sort of like the David Letterman of Canada at the time. And the show had a cult following in Canada. And Mike's manager was my good friend who passed away this year, Howard Lapidus. We love you, Howard. And he was Mike's manager. He also at the time managed Jimmy Kimmel, Adam Carolla, Dr. Drew. They had a show on MTV called Loveline, right? Everyone knows Loveline. Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla. He saw me, found out who I was, sent MTV 3 of my videos. They liked them, asked if I had any more. I said, yeah, I have 1,000 more. They said, 1,000? I said, 1,000. They flew me down to L.A., across the street. I went to the House of Blues, which is no longer there. I pitched MTV the show.
There? That's where you had your meeting?
That's where I had my meeting. They put me up in the Mondrian Hotel. I was in L.A. It was amazing. I was in L.A. I couldn't believe it. I was like 27 years old. I was excited to be in L.A. And they bought the show, and they moved it to New York. And the first 10 episodes was just me replaying all my clips I'd shot already. Mm-hmm. And then the show was a massive hit right away. It's the biggest show. And then they needed more clips. So then we had to go shoot more videos. And at that point, I realized, they don't really make videos the right way. Like they got like 20 people coming out on the shoot with us, and everybody was like kind of, like I said, walking around with clipboards, and you'd go up to someone on the street and talk to them. There'd be 7 people standing there, and I had to go back to the office and get in like a big argument, basically. Mm-hmm. With my bosses, and they didn't want to listen to me. But then eventually, they started to listen to me because they realized it was funnier when we did it the way we were doing it. So.
Yeah, what other kind of stuff did they try to come in with that you had to fight for?
So one thing was they would take all my videos, and by the way, I'm not saying MTV did it, because MTV's like a corporation.
Yeah,
it was like there were people there. Then they're all. I understand how it works. I mean, I was 28. They were, my boss was 33. And it was his big shot. Mm-hmm. He's got to make sure that he's successful in his career, and he has to follow the rules that he has. One of the rules at MTV was, we'll never have anyone on the air over the age of 30. So in all my videos, we'd go do these things on the street, and a lot of times people that would react were like senior citizens. An old lady would look, and so they would take all those shots out. But that was the funny part, They would take they'd re-edit everything. Remove that old lady. She's the old lady looking at Tom while he's falling on the ground with the crutches, and take that shot out. That was the funny part.
Yeah, isn't it all about getting the reaction?
About the reaction.
Because I've done little videos, and it's all about So
that's something they didn't understand. They literally didn't understand it was about the reaction shot. So I had one of my videos where I was going out in the street with crutches and casts on, and I'd fall, and people would come help me. And because inevitably a lot of the people that were coming to help me were adults, they would edit them all out, and then there was just a video of me falling on the ground with nobody looking at me. And it wasn't funny. And before it aired, of course, I had to go in and explain that to them, and they didn't understand. And then when I explained it to them, they didn't want to believe me because there was some corporate rule that said no one's ever on the air over the age of 30. And then I had to call, and then we had to get a big thing, and then we had to call their boss, and then finally we looked at both videos in a big argument. It took weeks, and finally we put the shots back in. This was all before the show ever went on the air, and then by the time the show got to air, it was in good shape. And the show was a big hit. Once the show was a big hit, which was right away, then they actually started to let me kind of do more what I wanted to do.
Was that validating?
It was nice, yeah. There was a funny thing that happened was there was a show called Talk Soup Remember that show?
Of course.
Yeah.
I know all these shows.
Yeah.
I'm angry. I don't know why I'm angry.
You grew up in the United States of America watching television.
This is all the stuff I grew up on.
Talk Soup was like a brand new thing to me because we didn't have that on in Canada. So to me, I sort of like didn't really know what it was. But then all of a sudden, they would say, "Oh, we don't like this bit, but we'll let you air it because you really, really like that one." I was always the one that I liked the most because it was probably the weirdest one.
Mm-hmm.
It was always the one they didn't want to put on the show. But then I'd argue because I was a naive 28-year-old kid who thought I could argue with the television network, right?
Yeah,
so I did.
Yeah.
Which I maybe I shouldn't have argued as much as I did, but I did because I was a naive kid. So I argued, and then they would let it go on, and then every week, the one that I wanted that they didn't want would be the clip of the week on Talk Soup, and they'd say it was the best clip of the week, because you could tell they were funny over there. You know, they had John Henson and Hal Sparks and those guys hosting it. They wanted it to be crazy over there. So then that lightened everybody up. They realized, oh, people like weird shit.
Mm-hmm.
I think MTV was always about being cool, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it still is to a certain extent. It's about being cool. I wasn't trying to be cool. I was trying to be weird. I was trying to be silly. I was trying to be absurd. That's a harder to define thing. And so the culture of MTV was always about being cool. That's not cool. That's weird. Why are you throwing hot dogs at that, you know, why are you and those old ladies throwing hot dogs at a puppet in the tree? It makes no sense. It's weird. That lady's weird. That's not cool. So I don't know. That's why it's funny, because it's weird. And then they started to figure that out.
Yeah. Tell me how you built your confidence and work to trust your instincts amongst all these people talking against that. And
I love that. I love that question. I don't think I've been asked that question like that before. I love that question.
Yes.
That's a good question. Now I've got to think if I have an answer to that.
You can, yeah.
I don't have like an instant answer because I don't get asked that question very much.
Well, chronologically, how did it work for you?
Because logically, there's no reason why I should have had that kind of confidence.
Yeah.
Because I naturally was sort of a socially awkward, insecure kid. But I think what it was, like, I was a skateboarder, okay? And I listened to, in the 80s, I was listening to rap music and punk rock music. And I always hated, like, the music that I would hear on the radio, most of it. And the kids at school, although I liked all the kids at school and I was on students' council and I got along with everybody, I was the only skateboarder at my school. So I'd show up with pants with skulls on them and my hair grown down in front of my face. And they were all wearing, Polo, Ralph Lauren, and listening to, the Eagles and Huey Lewis in the News. And although I like Huey Lewis in the News. But regardless, they were listening to more mainstream music, dressing, trying to be cool. I was trying to be weird because I wanted to kind of rebel against the mainstream. That was always in me. And so the same thing actually kind of crossed over into, I sort of had a certain disdain for television. Like, I would turn on TV and most stuff I just could not stand. I loved David Letterman. Letterman I loved because he was like making fun of television. But most other stuff on television, even comedy, I found was too middle of the road, mainstream. I wanted to kind of smash the conventions of it and make fun of it, basically. So after we'd been doing that for many years at this point, kind of making fun of television itself, sort of like a middle finger to the way things are made, when I finally got onto a real television channel, that kind of continued. It was like, okay, now we're here. In my mind, I felt like, you guys are doing this wrong. You just don't know it. And I stuck to that. So it was different than and plus, because I didn't grow up watching MTV, we didn't have MTV in Canada back then. We knew what it was, but we have Much Music. It was so, when I first got to New York and I started watching MTV, as much as I'm so grateful for them to have changed my life, like completely changed my life by picking up that show. I mean, it would have, I don't no idea what I'd be doing if MTV hadn't put me on. Any other channel could have put my show on. It would not have had the same impact. MTV, everybody in America watching MTV, all over the world watching MTV. Right place, right time. So I love MTV. But I would watch it and I'd just think like, wow, like outside, other than Beavis and Butthead, which I loved, everything else to me on that channel was just kind of like, oh, this is what we're kind of making fun of. You know, like Road Rules, a bunch of kind of jocks with their shirts off out there, like, sort of, like this is everything I hate.
Like the antithesis or fuck.
Yeah.
What was the word? Is that the word?
Yeah. It's totally the word.
Yeah.
Of what we were doing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't want to try to say it either.
Yeah.
Seems like a hard word to say.
Yeah, what is that word, Mike?
The antithesis. It's a hard word to say. I just said it wrong too.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
Antithesis.
Antithesis.
Yeah. It's like the antithesis of everything.
The antithesis of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It's almost like you're that kid in high school.
I hear a lot of, I hear this story that makes me feel, it's about the Beastie Boys. I love the Beastie Boys. And I always heard that they did, their song Fight for the Right to Party. They did that because they were making fun of all the jocks at school that would party, and then they were making fun of it. And then they became their biggest hit. And when they go play at concerts, they'd look down in the front row and there was all the jocks that they were making fun of, party, And they were like, what's happened, Like, that's kind of what it felt like when we ended up getting on MTV. It was like, we were in the belly of the beast of everything we'd been making fun of all along and looking around and going, okay, we've got to continue making fun of this. We've got to continue, dismantling this. And it was hard because there's a real system there.
So was Glenn and Phil and you constantly talking about like, just having that like pep talk that we have to like really maintain this thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was Glenn and Phil would come in for the show and be on the studio part of the show, but they weren't really involved in making the street stuff.
Yeah.
So I was editing all of that myself. I had some friends that I'd had helped me kind of come up with ideas for a couple of years, and so we would talk about that. I would talk about that with my manager at the time, Howard Lapidus, who I told you about. I would talk about that with some of the writers on the show, the producer of the show. I mean, there was, the new people that came in at MTV, we kind of would go out and have lunch and talk and hang out, and this would be kind of the nature of the conversation every day. I mean, we were openly talking about it.
Yeah.
We were saying, we want to destroy the way television's made and then put it back together, but upside down and incorrectly.
But did you do any sort of personal work at the time on your own or have like a specific person as a sounding board to really like keep you in that like confident place of just maintaining who you are while all of that stuff is going around trying to, or even potentially like once you're with MTV, like did you feel the need to almost like conform to like that cool style? Like how did you really just keep your specific thing going and like stay in that like self-esteem of that? I know I feel like I'm asking the same question, but it's a different.
So to kind of elaborate on the answer, so I did have my friend Howard Lapidus, who was my manager, who sold the show to MTV, who was also a producer on the show. And then I had an agent at the time, John Ferreter, who both, by the way, were very instrumental in this show being successful. They both passed away 6 months ago, 1 week apart from each other.
Sorry.
It's been a weird year. I missed them. And they were close friends right up to the end. But they were there every day. We'd be on the phone and saying, they're not going to let me air this clip, or they're not going to let us shoot this clip. And fortunately, they were pretty aggressive, take no prisoner, take no bullshit type of people. And they believed in me, and they would go in and fight for me. And, this sort of negotiating of like the creative aspect of what we were going to film, how we were going to edit things, got easier as the show continued to become more popular. But I sometimes think on the flip side, now, knowing what I know now, being older, and maybe having learned a little bit from my mistakes that I've potentially made over the years, that like maybe I could have listened to the other side a little more sometimes. You know, I feel like hindsight being 20/20, like, you know, sometimes I felt like, you know, when you're young, when you're in your 20s, you're always right about everything. Mm-hmm. Even though sometimes you're not right, but you feel like you're right. And that youthful naivety that I had, for the most part, it enabled me to create something that was new and different. But maybe I could have dialed in a little bit in a couple of occasions, and maybe things would have, you know, gone a little differently in some aspects of my life, you know. And now I've learned from that, and now when I'm working with people, I'm not always arguing about every idea if somebody disagrees with me, because I've learned that sometimes, even though it's not exactly what I would want to do, sometimes it's actually kind of cool. Like, it doesn't have to be completely insane all the time. I think we were in this mindset that everything had to be completely insane yeah. all the time. And sometimes I like things to be a little bit more structured now, too.
Well, that makes sense.
Like when I went on Saturday Night Live, I hosted Saturday Night Live, and I had just basically beat cancer, barely. I actually hadn't beat it yet. I was in the middle of having cancer. You know, I was kind of exhausted from that, and I went on that show, and I wanted to make it crazy. I wanted to make my episode of Saturday Night Live completely crazy. And I asked, can my friends from Canada come to the show and help me write some skits, right? So my friend Derek and my friend Sean, who were working with me on MTV, came to Saturday Night Live, and they gave us an office. We were sitting there, we wrote some skits. We ended up writing like half the skits on that episode of Saturday Night Live. Nobody came in the room, though, and told me, hey, you know, like the other writers think it's weird that you brought writers in.
People do that all the time, though.
Yeah, and I was like thinking, well, these aren't writers. I mean, they are writers because they were writers on my show on MTV, but, you know, 6 months earlier, one of them was unemployed and the other one was working as a bellman at a hotel, you know. Now, but they were my funny friends, and they are hilarious, and they actually continued to be writers, and now they actually are writers, and they were writers then too, but it was really about, I want my friends to come to Saturday Night Live with me, my friends who came up with me. Now I'm at Saturday Night Live. I want them to come with me and share in this experience because they worked hard to get me where I was too, and they deserve to be there. And so we all went in, and yeah, sure, we were thinking, let's dissect this show. Let's make this the craziest episode of SNL ever, you know? But, you know, sometimes our idea of crazy was, you know, making it look completely disorganized, making it look like something went wrong, making it look like, you know, it's chaos, right? And for that reason, I think then sometimes I feel like, and I've heard occasionally whispers from people that were there at the time, that people maybe resented the fact that I brought writers in, where we weren't really writers. It was me and my buddies, and we wanted to come in and fuck around and do a crazy episode of Saturday Night Live. But that's why I say, like, when I get older, I go like, oh, you know, maybe I would have handled that differently. Now, if I was ever to host Saturday Night Live again, which would be amazing to do someday, I probably wouldn't show up with some writers and try to make the show insane. I'd probably rather show up and go and ask what skits they're doing, and then I try to be a part of the sketch to the best of my acting ability and try to do a fun episode of Saturday Night Live without trying to completely dismantle and dissect and destroy the whole thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
On the flip side, I look at what we did on that show and I go, oh my God, I can't believe it. We did that. That's insane that we did that. That I had the confidence on Saturday Night Live at 28 years old to go in there and try to, you know, sort of, you know, write and do our thing the way we did. You know, I don't understand why I didn't just go in there. Wasn't just looking around and couldn't believe it. I mean, I think the other thing is what can happen a lot, and this is the idea. The reason I'm talking so much about this is I do feel like I do have some sort of something that I could impart to the viewers out there who are young people that maybe they could learn from this, because nobody ever told me this at the time. I wish somebody had told me this at the time, but when you're young like that, you're always right about everything, and sometimes it's probably better just to kind of just stop, sit back, listen a little bit. You don't always have to, do everything your way.
I hear that you have obviously done a lot of self-reflection on a lot of this stuff,
yeah.
and that
part of the reason I like coming on podcasts like this sometimes is because I don't really like going to therapists.
Yeah.
Because I always end up leaving feeling kind of bad about myself because I
too.
feel like, I had to pay somebody to talk about how my life is screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, we're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just funny.
Well,
I'm not paying somebody to tell me that I'm screwed up or anything.
Yeah, it's great that you're talking about all this, but I hear you seem to be a very kind person who, and it sounds like you are like making a lot of apologies for some stuff that in your past, but I just want to say, as someone on the other end, if it makes you feel better at all, anyway, so many people needed someone like that and loved to see someone who was doing something so crazy, so much of that you wouldn't get away with today.
Yeah.
So as bad as you might feel or would reflect on, maybe I should have done something different. It changed so many people's lives and inspired so many people. And without someone doing all that stuff, it just would have sucked. Yeah. So from my end, I'm sorry that, if you're going, whatever, looking back and reflecting, but I really appreciate it. I know a lot of all of my friends did, and
and those were the people that I wanted to enjoy it.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand was the complexity of the show business industry. All the kids that were watching, I wanted them to have a laugh because, I was going nuts on SNL. But maybe some of the producers at SNL or the writers. Them. Yeah, that was the attitude at the time, kind of. Even though I wasn't like that. I mean, I did want. I think I kind of thought they thought it was funny too. But then in hindsight, I realized, maybe they kind of felt like I was being disrespectful, which I wasn't trying to be. I was trying to just kind of let's make this crazy. I mean, my show's crazy. I'm kind of crazy. Let's make it crazy. And I think most people did understand that. But I do think that in hindsight, what I didn't realize, and I've talked to some people about this, SNL cast members who I've interviewed over the years, and I've talked about this. I never really realized that they were a little nervous to meet me, which I had no idea. Yeah. I thought I was kind of nervous to be there. This is Saturday Night Live. And, this is what I was going to say earlier, and I lost my train of thought. I wish somebody had told me that it's okay to pretend you don't know what you're doing. When I got the chance to go on SNL, I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I'd never done sketch comedy before. Mm-hmm. I'd never really done much acting. We'd shot the movie Road Trip. It was the first time I'd ever been in a movie. I made it all up as I went along. I never had any formal acting training. Didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to do a talk show. I wanted to do stand-up. I wanted to do comedy. I didn't want to be acting like somebody else. I wanted to be. So in that environment, when I would go on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart or The Tonight Show or SNL, and I didn't know what I was doing, how to go on The Daily Show, rather than go on and just kind of be a wide-eyed 28-year-old kid who was excited to be there and didn't know what he was doing. I took it way further and went on and did something so insane, partially to mask the fact that I didn't know what I was doing, to look like I was really confident. And I realized in hindsight, a lot, every time I would go on, I did The Tonight Show 30 times, and every time I went on, I would come on with some big stunt. I'd have a huge, costume. I'd do something insane. And, probably it would have been just as good if I just went on and just had a conversation and talked about, like, how I started my show and, wow, I'm so happy to be here.
Did you feel like that was expected of you? And did you feel like you were sort of caught in a loop of having to outdo yourself that became exhausting or maybe just really hard?
I grew up watching Letterman. And when Andy Kaufman, it wasn't exactly the example I would use because I actually didn't really know much about Andy Kaufman till later. But when people went on Letterman, and it got weird. I remember like Harvey Picar would go on, or, Dave didn't like when Crispin Glover tried to kick him, but, like there was Chris Elliott was actually the example. Chris Elliott, the man under the stairs. He would come on and he would do something bizarre and outrageous. I kind of felt like I almost was, such a huge fan of Chris Elliott. When he showed up on Letterman, that was my favorite thing. And he'd always do something crazy. Come on and eat dog food or something insane, And that to me was what television was supposed to be, like making fun of the idea of being a guest on a talk show. So when it came time for me to actually be a guest on a talk show, I wanted to do that. I wanted to go on and sort of mock the fact that I'm the guest on a talk show, as opposed to actually just be a guest on a talk show. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes maybe the host of the talk show, not going to give any specific examples, but I think sometimes they felt that was a little presumptuous of me as a kid from Canada to come on their talk show and go crazy and do all this crazy stuff, when really they're the funny one. I'm the kid from Canada who's lucky to be there. Maybe, I should have just gone on and been like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. Yes, I painted my parents' house. Well, I can't believe it. And just been a normal person,
Knowing your role.
Yeah, know my role, yeah. So I think that if somebody had taken me aside, I would have done a lot less crazy stuff on other people's shows, maybe kept the crazy stuff on my show. And then maybe, that would have been better. I think that sometimes rubs people the wrong way if you try to be too funny all the time,
But you wouldn't have been Tom Green. I think everyone expected all of that of you.
Well, it's confusing because it was sort of a character,
But I think if you came on and was acting like a normal person, they'd be waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah. No, I think there's just sort of like a line that maybe like I'm not saying to have gone on and, been like, a buttoned up, boring, straight-laced individual, but maybe also not to have taken it quite as far as I took it, which was like really, 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 really too far.
Do you have a specific time in mind you took it way too far?
Well, like one time on The Tonight Show, I said to the producers, hey, I'd like to roll the J bar out.
What's a J bar?
They have a bar that they bring around on wheels to all the dressing rooms, and I was always surprised because there was Jägermeister on it. And I'd be like, you're giving... is Oprah doing a shot of Jägermeister before she goes on the show? And they go, I'm not sure about Oprah specifically, but yeah, people will have a shot of whiskey before they come out. I go, did people know this? I go, this is what I want to do for my bit. I want to roll the J bar out, and then I want to do a shot with Jay. Well, Jay doesn't drink. Well, let me take a shot with Jay, and he can throw it over his shoulder. And they go, okay, that'll be the bit. You'll roll the J bar out, okay? So I'm backstage at The Tonight Show. My movie Stealing Harvard is coming out, which is like, a real movie, And, was sort of a big deal at the time. Like, I was responsible to promote this movie. And, we're backstage. I'm with one of my friends from high school who came to Saturday Night Live with me and worked with me on my show and was sort of a bit of a shit disturber, We were shit disturbers.
Yeah.
But he was also a shit disturber. And when you get two shit disturbers together, sometimes, like, you disturb, like, 10 times more shit than if it was just one shit disturber, So he would kind of, like, push me to do stuff that I probably shouldn't do, And so we were backstage getting ready to go on, roll out the J bar, and he's like, do a shot. I'm like, well, I'll do it out there. No, do a shot. And so I do a shot. Now we're laughing. Okay, yeah. Do another shot. Well, I better not, No, do another shot. So, 20 minutes before I walk out, I do another shot. By the time I walked out, I'd probably done 4 or 5 shots before I'd even walked on stage, which wasn't part of the initial bit. Then I get on stage and do a shot. This is now my 6th shot. It's just kicking in. Now I'm actually drunk on The Tonight Show. And every time I do a shot, that gets a huge laugh. So we end up, getting upwards around like 7 or 8 or 10 shots of Jägermeister on The Tonight Show. The next guest comes out, Rosario Dawson. She's out there. I'm like, I don't remember actually much of what happened after that. I think I kind of spilled wine. It was like, it was outrageous. Fortunately, I had a very good relationship with Jay and all of that stuff. Been on the show many times. Nothing dramatically bad happened other than the fact that I was drunk, not just joking around with the J Bar, but flat out drunk on the Tonight Show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And next day I wake up, my phone rings. It's Jay. He calls me at home to see if I'm okay, because I was pretty drunk. It was nice. Then phone rings again, and it's, my publicist at the time, and there's a full-page article in the New York Post, dead drunk. Why did Tom Green go on the Tonight Show and get drunk, right? This is like, internet's not as, there's internet, but this was like, big news in the newspapers around the country. Then you get a call from the movie studio. Why'd you do that? Oh, it was a bit, it was a joke. Like they have a J Bar, but we read in the New York Post, dead drunk. And I was dead drunk, but that was the bit. And then people get confused and upset, and the industry gets upset because I'm unpredictable or something like that. But no, it was all a bit. We were just trying to do some sort of a Andy Kaufman type, Chris Elliott type deconstructive prank. You're not supposed to do that. And then my phone rang, and it was I remember cell phones were new. So, I remember I was in my car, and I had like my first cell phone or something like that. Phone starts ringing, and just, I don't recognize the number. This then, the next day, and I answer the phone. It's Howard Stern calling me on my personal phone, telling me that he thought that me getting drunk on the Tonight Show was the funniest thing he's ever seen in his life on the Tonight Show. So I'm getting lots of positive feedback from people. From incredible people.
I love how,
Howard Stern is like my hero, is calling. Somebody I did college radio. I was up in Canada reading Private Parts, and, before anything happened, and inspired by his whole story of being on college radio and making it big. And so it's like now he's calling me on my phone and pushing me. So you're getting pushed in both directions. You get some people saying, yeah, drink another shot. Yeah, go do this crazy thing on SNL, do this. And then you get the more conservative, business side of the industry who are like, ooh, geez, better not do that. And so I think, knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, maybe I would have walked the line a little differently. Maybe I would have only done 3 shots. And it would still been funny, but I wouldn't have lost complete control on the show, even though it was a bit.
Yeah.
The joke was kind of on me too. A lot of the times, it was like, look how stupid I'm being. Can you believe that this guy's being that stupid? And then people were sort of laughing almost at me, which I knew, but I don't know. I don't know if I had to do that. I think I could have been just as funny on there having done 3 shots as opposed to 13.
Yeah.
13's a lot of shots.
Yeah. But then maybe Howard Stern would have never called you.
He probably would not have.
Yeah. So. Nor
would the movie studio would have not called angry.
Yeah.
Said, we don't want you to do any more talk shows to promote this movie because.
Howard's better though, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is.
So you grew up on an army base, is that right?
When I was a kid, yeah. My dad was a captain in the Canadian Army. We have an army. Canada has an army. But he was a tank commander. Disciplinarian, strict military guy. Has calmed down a lot. Love you, Dad. Love you, Mom.
Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom.
They will listen to this.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they listen to everything you do?
They do. Not every single local radio spot and stuff, but I mean, if it gets tweeted out on my Twitter, which you'll tweet this to me and then I'll retweet it, they'll listen to it.
Yeah.
And he was a strict guy, and I was on a military base till I was about 7, with different bases, a couple different ones. Then when I was 7, we moved to Ottawa and lived in a normal suburban area.
So I set this up to ask, what is it from your childhood? Because we do podcasts instead of therapy. Set that up.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that made you have that I need to fuck with people drive inside of you?
Part of it is the strict military, authoritarian, structured upbringing, pushing back against that, which is probably why I liked skateboarding. But then once I liked that, that's probably part of it too, because the culture of reading Thrasher magazine and listening to punk rock music and, you know, middle finger to the society stuff is in you. But that was more my teenage years. Go back to earlier than that. It was probably that. For the other thing is when you're in the military, in a military family, you know, we moved every single year for the first 7 years of my life. So I was a new kid in class every year for all those formative years. And I have an answer for you because I've thought about this. But I was extremely skinny, like the skinniest kid in the school. It wasn't like I just thought that, like I was. And everybody knew it. And they would say it. And I was insecure about that. And I'd be the new kid, I'd show up. I'm taller and skinnier than everybody, which is sort of like being weaker when you're a kid. If your schoolyard bully comes at you, like, I don't have any kind of weight, like he's going to get me on the ground, he's going to beat the crap out of me, so, and I look a little different, so, you know, I better find a way to, like, kind of navigate through this, you know? So, you know, usually, inevitably, the first day of school, I would walk into class, and I would trip over the metal garbage can, and it would make a big noise. And then I'd fall and grab for the teacher's desk and knock all of her books off the desk. And the first time any kid would see me in the third grade was like that, like a huge pratfall. Yeah. And they would all laugh. And it was so obvious a stunt, but then the teacher couldn't quite tell if it was, so she was worried about me. And then I trip over the can again, and it was unclear what was going on, and it was weird. And all of a sudden, the teacher was alerted to the fact that this kid's going to be a little different. We're going to have to keep our eye on this kid. And then I'd go out in the schoolyard, and the kids would come up, and we'd all laugh about it. And they go, "Oh, my God, did you do that on purpose?" Yeah, I did it on purpose, and it was funny. And then I had friends, you know.
Yeah. I did the same exact thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess when I was reading your Wikipedia page and I saw the army base thing, because I notice a trend with a lot of people who move around, you know, they have that like common thing of, you know, wanting to be liked. So I was wondering if that like drove, you know, I want to get to like what drove you to, you know, want to be like essentially the center of attention and fucking with people and pushing the envelope. Like, what was that thing that was driving you?
When I was in the 6th grade, when I was in the 4th grade, was the first time we had to do public speaking, and it was a big thing. I don't know if that's like that everywhere, but in our school and in Canada, it was a big thing. It became like really the gist of your entire English mark at the end of the year was based on how well you did on your public speech, because you had to write it, you had to get up, and you had to speak to the class. In the 3rd grade, I did it. My speech was on rocks. Like igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks, okay? All about that. Granite is this and all that. Limestone is a sedimentary rock. You know, it was really boring, right? But I did so well at it that I got like a 98% in public speaking, and I realized, oh, I'm kind of good at like standing up in front of people and speaking. So then the next year, in the 5th grade, I did How I Would Change the School, okay? And that was kind of a comedy show, you know, Coca-Cola and the water fountains, blah, 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 right? And then I did really well in that, but I didn't win for my grade, but I did get a great mark, but I didn't get to go on to the school finals, okay? Or I did go to the school finals. I didn't win for the school. Daryl Page won for the school.
Fuck you, Daryl.
Yeah. He's a good guy, though, and he deserved it.
Just kidding. Hi, Daryl.
He deserved it. I haven't talked to him in 30 years, but he's a good guy. He won. I remember he won because it was competitive. 4th grade, 5th grade. This was 5th grade. Competitive. We went in front of the whole school. I remember the anxiety and energy, though, I felt of getting up in front of the whole school. They'd all go down to the auditorium to watch these speeches, the finalists from every class. It was like 5 of us. It's a big deal. The winner went on to compete in the regional finals. Right? So I lost in the 5th grade to Daryl Page. So then in the 6th grade, my speech was on comedy, okay? I now knew what this was, like getting up in front of people and telling jokes. And I understood there was different kinds of comedy. So it was a technical speech about comedy. It's about slapstick humor is this, sarcasm is this. You know, it was explaining to a bunch of 6th graders what comedy is, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't have that.
Yeah. And I had a thing where, you know, I remember the opening of the speech. You remember dot matrix printers? They had like the paper was all like tied together. You know, it was like this is predating you, but dot matrix printers, if you printed something back in the day, the printers, all the paper was attached together with little perforated things and little holes in the side, and it would go in the printer, and they would like reel.
On the side, there would be the line.
The little line, yeah. They would reel through. And so you could have a stack of paper. If you held one sheet and you dropped it, it would unravel, and you have a long sheet of paper. And I wrote E equals MC squared on every piece of paper. In the opening of my speech, I walked out. I'm a kid, you know. I walk out, and I open this, and I drop it, and it unravels. It says E equals MC squared all the way down. And I start by explaining the theory of relativity, you know. And then I say, I'm just kidding. My speech is not on the theory of relativity today. That's an example of slapstick comedy, right? Because I'd done a physical pratfall thing, right? And then the speech goes into all this stuff about comedy and all this stuff. And I'm talking different kinds of jokes and different kinds of things. And at the end of the speech, the teachers, the judges would ask you a question. And the judge stands up. Everyone gets asked one question. I think Daryl Page was in this final too. And Elizabeth Pang as well. I remember it was very tough competition. And the teacher stands up and she asks me my question. She says, you said in your speech that you can use comedy to get out of an uncomfortable situation, but you never gave us an example of that. Give us an example of how you could do that now. Okay? So the whole school's watching. People are nervous, tension. Is he going to have an answer, right? And this joke that had popped into my head was just like a joke. Not my joke. It was just a joke I'd read in a joke book. But I said, but it applied to this situation. I said, well, actually, yes, the last time I went home with my report card, when I gave it to my dad, I said, Dad, here's my report card. I want you to know before you read it, my marks are underwater. And my dad said, what do you mean they're underwater? And I said, well, they're below sea level. Right? Ha, ha, ha. Huge laugh, though. Huge laugh for a 6th grade kid, right? Because I had an answer. Yeah. Massive laugh. Honestly, like, probably the best laugh I've ever heard in my life before or since, you know? Because it's like it was the first laugh. It was the first time, you know, you hear that whole roar, you know? Oh, it was cool. So I went out in the schoolyard, and all the kids, how'd you think of that? And then I went back in, and I won for the school, and I went on to the regional finals. Little kid, 6th grade, do my speech on comedy. Same judge stands up and tries to stump me again, right? She says, okay, you talked a lot about comedy. Who's your favorite comedian and why? And now I'm like in the 6th grade, and, you know, I'm nervous and nothing pops into my head, but I'd been watching Johnny Carson, you know? Mm-hmm. So I say, Ed McMahon, right, which was Johnny Carson's sidekick, right? I say, Ed McMahon. And she goes, and why? I go, because I really like him, you know? And then I lost for the regionals. Damn. Yeah. You're still kidding. And in hindsight, I think about it, I go, that was actually a pretty good fucking answer. Ed McMahon, I was pretty hip for a kid in 6th grade. I got to know later in life, I did my internet TV show up in my living room, and Ed McMahon would come up and do it all the time. And he was a very amazing man. That's cool. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the cool thing about having a podcast? Yeah. Just getting to like hang out with people and meet comics and talk. Yeah. So I started my web show in 2003 in my living room, and I did it for about 6 or 7 years, and it was essentially a podcast, although it was video, and it was going out to my website. Actually, when we started it, there was no YouTube yet, and so we had our own servers, and we'd go to my website, and a lot of people were watching because there was nothing else on the internet. We were getting millions of people watching, but no advertisers, nobody knew what it was, you know. So it seemed like at an early age you knew that you had to make things on your own if you wanted to do something, which I feel like a lot of people in this town don't know. Wait for things, and you take the initiative to do things. Did you learn that from somewhere, or was that just like a natural kind of like thought that came to mind that you continued doing? When I was in high school, I started a rap group. I was in a rap group. It's on YouTube.
What was your name?
It's called Organized Rhyme. I was MC Bones, rocking the microphones like a king on a throne. Only thing is I stand alone. We did it like over a beat and stuff. But I made all the beats. And I made the beats because I would go work a summer job because my dad made me work summer jobs. He would wake me up at 6 a.m. He'd drop me off at the Student Employment Center and make me fill out cards till I had a job, like, mowing lawns or whatever all day. So the good news is I ended up making some money. I made a few bucks doing summer jobs, full-time jobs every summer. And at the end of the summer, I'd go buy a drum machine or something like that because I love the Beastie Boys and Run DMC and all this stuff. And anyway, so then I just started like messing with technology, which was like at the time, that was a drum machine in 1986 or 85 was the equivalent of like streaming internet today.
Yeah.
Like it was like so new. Nobody knew even what that was, in Ottawa. And because I was the only kid really in Ottawa making beats, I was the best kid in Ottawa at making beats because nobody else was making beats. When you're the only person doing something, like you're like the best at it automatically.
Yeah.
You're automatically the best at it. And so that's kind of when I learned that. I realized, if you do something before anyone else does it, you're the best at it. Mm-hmm. And I like being the best.
Yeah.
And I might not be talented enough to be the best, so I just got to be the first.
That makes sense.
You can definitely put yourself in an advantageous position if you study technology and you look at new emerging trends in technology and you try to figure out how you can apply that to yourself creatively before anybody else does it. Because if you wait, everyone else figures it out first, and then you're the last guy on TikTok. I mean, nobody gives a fuck.
Right.
I joined TikTok this week.
I know, my friend's trying to get me
it's pretty fun.
I feel like I don't need another thing.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Your I'm trying to think of like the one question. Your stand-up is totally different from your stand-up is very like controlled. It's about social commentary, right? Would you say?
I don't like to say it's too controlled because I do get pretty weird on stage.
Okay, so I
don't want people to think that I'm sort of like being a sort of a uptight philosophical person, but I do like to have a definite structure of making a point about the world because I feel like then when I get weird, it makes the weird seem a little weirder.
Okay, because I only briefly saw you. So I don't know what you would do in like a full hour
I tend to take it through a little journey where at a certain point I get very strange, but then, I found that if I'm just strange on stage, then, people, tune out. Like, we're watching a guy like crawling around on the ground, with his saliva dripping out of his face or whatever. Nobody wants to see it. So I'd like to sort of have a nice structure. I do like to talk about the world and society and human, problems and the condition of what life is like in 2019 and all of that stuff. And then I do definitely like then break the mold a lot within my show and get weird.
Yeah, so what I saw was you talking about how like social media has is essentially like ruining society. I completely agree. I talk about it from time to time on the podcast. So how do you balance like your use of like your phone and all of that and just kind of like what's your opinion on it?
Like the honest answer is I don't think I've got a balance right now. I think I'm definitely far too addicted to it and it sucks. Like I get up in the morning and before I get out of bed, I'm looking at my comments on Instagram. Like it's sitting there beside the bed and then you pick it up and you start looking at it and like my eyes are blurry and I had to get glasses. Because my eyes are like blurry now from being on my phone too much. Because I'm old.
No, you aren't.
But thank you. I guess I'm not that old yet.
No,
but
not.
like so like I can't see my phone anymore without these.
Yeah.
And so it is. I am aware that I'm addicted to it, and I'm aware that I'm addicted to it, and because I'm aware that I'm addicted to it, and I am interested in technology, so I don't feel like I can totally abandon it. I did say on my social media a few weeks ago that I was going to get a flip phone and get rid of my smartphone, and I haven't even told my friends and followers on Instagram yet that I don't think I'm going to be able to do it because as much as I like to dream about a world where I could not be using social media, I do think it is something that is the way I'm expressing myself creatively right now. You know,
Yeah,
and it's also
like,
I'm on tour, and you got to tell people you're there. Can't roll into San Antonio, Texas, and not tell anyone you're there and expect them to show up to your show. So that's how we do it now as comedians. We
it
let
just
people
is
know.
what it is.
Yes, it's what it is. So, but because I'm very aware of it, I am aware of the fact that it is definitely a problem, and I'm aware that we're addicted to it, and I'm aware that we're messing up our brains, and that like our brains are actually not functioning the way they're supposed to function anymore. You know, like it used to be, the cavemen, they'd walk like you hear about like how tigers like will walk like 1,000 miles and like find like, like their buddy or whatever.
Yeah.
That's because their brains, like they have to, so their brains work differently. The more we don't use that part of our brain, navigation systems, now that we use a navigation system, now you don't have to remember where you're going. Because you used to have to remember, you have to pay attention when you were going somewhere there because you had to remember how to get back. Now we don't use that part of our brain anymore because we can go to our phone and figure out our way back. So because we're not using that part of our brain anymore, that muscle becomes weak and it eventually won't even function. So then if you get rid of your phone, you're not going to be able to like find things. That's what's going to happen in 100 years. People aren't going to be able to go for a walk and find their way back without a phone because that part of their brain won't work anymore. That's the extent of it. Right now, being 20 years into this, I do start to sense very real things. Like I definitely feel, and I'm sure you feel this too. I'm just kind of like saying the way. Tell me if you can confirm this is true. Like, if I don't look at my phone for a while, I start to feel kind of a little bit of anxiety. But I also, if I don't look at it for a whole day, which I have done, I just did a tour of Asia. And when I was in Asia, I was like, I don't want to have my phone on me all the time. So I brought a regular digital camera.
Yeah.
And I left my phone in the hotel room. And when I went out for a walk with my buddy who was with me, we were videotaping stuff. I knew he had his phone, so if we got in trouble, we could call a Uber or whatever. And so for that entire 2 weeks, I didn't have a phone most of the time. I felt great.
Yeah, you have an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was like kind of more engaged with conversation. I was looking around at stuff. I wasn't looking at this all the time. And then, like now, like if I had my phone there, look at that, mountain. I'd take a picture of it. And then I'd be walking around Hong Kong, but at the same time, part of my mind's going like, geez, I wonder what people on Instagram think of that mountain that I took a picture of 3 minutes ago. I better check. Oh, somebody just called me a fucking asshole. Well, fuck you. Now I'm talking to some guy who called me an asshole when really I should be walking around in Hong Kong, eating delicious food and looking at like cool things and not worrying about what some asshole in Cleveland thinks about the mountain that I took a picture of 3 minutes ago.
Do you notice that it affects you creatively as well? Like the more breaks I take from my phone, I'm like, I have so many more thoughts that come. I do. And that's why I want to get rid of it. But then so I'm trying to find a happy medium. I haven't found that yet. One of the happy mediums that I've sort of found, which I don't think is enough, is I have this digital camera. It's a Sony RS100. It's a nice little camera. Shoots great video. And often, but not often enough, I'll leave my phone behind or I'll leave it in the car. And then if I need to take a picture of something for my social media, because it's important to document everything, I still can. So, but I don't leave my phone behind enough, Yeah.
And but when I do, I feel better about it. And I feel like as you and everyone probably is aware who's on social media, I feel like we can't control how much we're on there because it's an addiction. Because we're addicted to dopamine, right? You get a dopamine rush when you look at something and it's a positive feeling, and you're addicted to that. So every time you look at your phone, you get a little squirt of dopamine in your brain, and that's what's going on. That's why you keep looking at it. You feel good when you look at it. It's a physical, chemical addiction, right? And so strictly the amount of time wasted is shocking. Like, I will look at my phone some days at noon, and I just started that screen time thing. And I look at it, it's like, you've been on your phone for 5 hours and 32 minutes, and it's noon.
It's nauseating.
I could have like probably written like 20 jokes or a chapter of a novel in 5 hours and 20 minutes. But instead I've been, and the shit that I look at too, fucking like dogs playing with ducks. Like, you know, like a lot of, and there's an algorithm, right? So it feeds you, you look at one thing and then it just keeps feeding you that. And for whatever reason, I just keep getting fed these dogs playing with ducks. Like I've looked at every example on video on the planet of a German Shepherd playing with another species of animal in a cute fashion. I've seen every one. I've seen a cat chasing a Siberian Husky and it cowering in fear and the owner laughing in the background. You know, I've seen that. I've seen versions of that. I've seen a badger and a coyote attacking like a python. You know, I've seen every version of that. You know, the lion sneaking up behind the trainer. I've seen every lion video, like animals or whatever. And then after like watching 4 hours of that, I know that has no application to my job. You know, I'm not going to go around. I mean, other than maybe right now talking about it and mocking it, which I do sometimes. I do want to double down though and talk. I do want to come up with some sort of bit about that, about the bullshit that we end up watching on social media. The sheer volume of completely irrelevant stuff that we're putting into our brains because of the algorithm of Facebook and social and Instagram keeps pumping all this random shit. At least if I wish I could program my phone to feed me stuff that was useful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, because you know it's more interesting looking at a cute, you know, and these fucking like the dropping the sheet and then you're gone and the dog is like surprised. Oh, man, I've seen every one of those. Every single one of those I've seen, and it's, you know, why when you realize that that's what it is, do you continue watching it? You know what the dog's gonna do, right? It's just gonna. Why do we keep? I've seen hundreds of those.
I've never seen one.
Oh, you don't see? My algorithm is messed up. Like funny animal videos is all I get now.
I get that on Facebook.
You don't know what I mean?
I get the cute,
when the owner stands
puppies
in the doorway with a blanket behind it, and then his dog's sitting there. He goes, "Hey, Fluffy, hey," and the dog looks, and he puts the thing up, and then he drops it, but runs away, and it drops, and he's not there anymore, and the dog goes, "Where'd he go? Where'd he go?" It's so funny to me. And because I watched 10 of them, now it's all I get. And a cobra falls in the water and it can't get out, so the guy has to crawl in and get the cobra out with a stick.
Do you have a dog?
I had 2 Siberian Huskies. Yeah.
I had a Siberian Husky.
Oh yeah, I had 2 Siberian Huskies.
Did you do the sheet?
No, because they passed away 3 years ago before this went viral.
Well, Tom,
I wish I could have.
I feel we're out of time.
Yeah, this was great.
Thank you so much for coming.
I feel good. I feel like I got a lot off my chest here. You know, it was nice to be able to kind of come out and just sort of have this cathartic experience talking about myself and my opinions, my feelings. Appreciate it. And you got a great show here, and congratulations. And I love it. Let's sign off.
Thank you. And then your website is where people can see your tour dates. And
I'm on the road. I'm actually working next weekend. I don't normally go right up to the end of the year, but my last shows of the year are in Dallas this weekend, and then I'm doing a big New Year's Eve show in Ottawa, in my hometown in Ottawa. So come to Ottawa, everybody, for New Year's Eve. And then my first shows back are in Miami, mid-January at the Miami Improv, and then on and on and on.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on. Thank you guys for listening, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.